He didn't speak English well, not at work, not in public, not even when ordering food. And every day, that silence followed him. If you've ever lived in a country where English is not your first language, you know this feeling. You understand more than people think. You think faster than you can speak. But when the moment comes, the words don't show up. Your mouth freezes. Your heart beats faster. And suddenly, you feel smaller than you really are. This is not a story about perfect English. It's not about accents disappearing overnight. And it's not about becoming someone else. This is a story about a man who felt invisible. Not because he lacked talent, not because he lacked intelligence, but because he lacked words. Every mistake felt louder than his effort. Every pause felt like failure. Every conversation felt like a test he was not ready for. Yet somehow, he stayed. He stayed when it was uncomfortable. He stayed when it was embarrassing. He stayed when quitting would have been easier. And that choice, to stay, to try again, to speak even when his voice was shaking, changed everything. If English has ever made you feel weak, this story is for you. Part 1. The first day. He felt small. The first day was not dramatic. No one shouted. No one laughed out loud. But he still remembers it clearly. He walked into the building with hope in his chest and fear in his stomach. New country, new job, new life. People smiled and said, "Hi, how are you?" He smiled back and answered, "Good, thank you." That part was easy. Then the questions changed. They spoke faster. Their sentences were longer. Their words blended together like one long sound. He caught a few words. Meeting, deadline, email. But the meaning slipped away before he could hold it. He nodded. Not because he understood everything, but because he didn't want to look stupid. Inside his head, the thoughts were clear. He knew what he wanted to say. He had opinions. He had ideas. But English stood between his mind and his mouth. When someone asked him directly, his face became hot. His hands felt heavy. Seconds passed like minutes. He answered with short sentences, broken sentences, safe sentences. "Yes, I think so. I will try." Later that day, he went to the restroom and looked at himself in the mirror. Same face, same person. But something felt different. Back home, he was confident. People listened when he spoke. Here, he felt like a child again. Learning how to speak, learning how to exist. That was the first day he felt small. Not because he was small, but because language made him feel that way. And the hardest part? He went home that night and practiced English alone. Not because anyone forced him to, but because deep inside, he refused to believe that this was the best he could be. Part 2. When simple words became walls. At first, he thought the problem was vocabulary. He told himself, "If I learn more words, everything will be fine." So he memorized lists. He watched videos. He listened to podcasts on the bus at night before sleeping. But real life didn't wait for perfect English. At work, people spoke in ways textbooks never taught him. They used short phrases. They cut sentences in half. They joked in the middle of serious conversations. Someone said, "Let's circle back." Another said, "Just give me a heads up." He understood every word, but not the meaning. Those simple phrases became walls, not big walls, invisible ones. He could see the conversation happening on the other side, but he couldn't step in. Emails were safer. He could read them slowly. He could rewrite his reply 10 times. But meetings were different. People interrupted each other. They changed topics quickly. They expected fast answers. When he didn't speak, they moved on. Not because they didn't respect him, but because silence in America often sounds like agreement or absence. One day a coworker asked, "Are you okay with this plan?" He wanted to say, "I have concerns, but I need time to explain." Instead, he said, "Yes." That one word followed him for weeks. The plan failed. Mistakes happened. And even though it wasn't his fault, he blamed himself. Not for the mistake, but for not speaking. That night, he sat alone in his apartment. No TV, no phone. Just one question in his mind. How many times will I stay quiet before I disappear? He realized something painful. English was not just a language. It was power. The power to disagree. The power to ask for help. The power to be seen. And without it, even simple words could block his future. But instead of giving up, he made a quiet decision. If English was the wall, he would learn how to climb it. One sentence at a time. Part 3. The silence that hurt more than mistakes. He was not afraid of English. He was afraid of what came with it. The looks, the pauses, the small smiles people tried to hide. Every time he opened his mouth, his mind ran faster than his words. He worried about grammar. He worried about pronunciation. He worried about sounding less intelligent. So, most of the time, he chose silence. Silence felt safer. When he didn't speak, he couldn't be wrong. When he didn't speak, no one could correct him. When he didn't speak, no one could judge his accent. But silence had a cost. At lunch, conversations happened around him. Stories were shared. Jokes were told. He laughed a second late, only after he understood. Sometimes he laughed even when he didn't. Just to belong. In meetings, his name was rarely called. Not because he wasn't capable, but because people stopped expecting him to speak. That realization hurt more than any grammar mistake. One evening, someone asked him, "Why are you so quiet?" He smiled and said, "I'm just listening." But inside, he wanted to scream, "I have so much to say." That night, he practiced speaking alone, not reading, not writing, speaking. He spoke to the mirror, to the wall, to the empty room. His sentences were slow, unnatural, full of mistakes. And yet, for the first time, he didn't stop himself. He remembered something important. Children don't learn by staying quiet. They learn by sounding wrong. Mistakes are loud. Progress is quiet. And silence. Silence keeps everything the same. From that day on, he promised himself one thing. He would rather speak broken English than live a broken confidence. And that promise changed the way he saw himself. Part 4. One small decision that changed everything. The change didn't come from a big moment. No applause, no dramatic speech, no sudden confidence. It came on an ordinary day. He was standing in line at a coffee shop. The barista asked a simple question he didn't fully catch. Normally, he would smile and nod. Say yes. Take whatever came. But this time, he paused. His heart beat faster. His English was not ready. Still, he spoke. "Sorry. Can you say that again, please?" The sentence was simple, not perfect, but clear. The barista repeated the question, slowly, kindly. No impatience, no judgment. That was it. Nothing magical happened, but something shifted inside him. He realized the world was not waiting to punish him for mistakes. Most people were too busy with their own lives. The fear had been louder than reality. From that day, he made a small rule for himself. Speak once every day, even when it feels uncomfortable. Not long conversations, not perfect sentences, just one moment of courage, one question in a meeting, one comment at lunch, one sentence to a stranger. Some days, his voice shook. Some days, he chose the wrong words. But each time he spoke, the fear lost a little power. He stopped waiting to feel ready, because ready never came. Confidence didn't arrive first. Action did. And slowly, almost quietly, English stopped being the enemy. It became a tool, not to sound smart, but to be present. Part 5. Learning English the hard way. He stopped chasing fluency. That word had hurt him for too long. Instead of asking, "How can I sound like a native?" he asked a better question. "How can I be understood?" He changed the way he learned English. No more long vocabulary lists he never used. No more complicated grammar rules he couldn't remember. He focused on real life. At work, he listened carefully, not to every word, but to patterns. How people started meetings, how they disagreed politely, how they asked for help without sounding weak. He wrote down full sentences, not single words. "I need more time to finish this." "I'm not sure I understand. Can you explain that?" "I see your point, but I think we should consider another option." He practiced these sentences out loud, every day, in the car, in the shower, while walking alone. It felt strange at first, but slowly, his mouth learned the rhythm. He also allowed himself to be slow. He stopped apologizing for his accent, stopped saying, "My English is bad," because every apology made him smaller. When he didn't understand something, he asked again. When he made a mistake, he corrected it and moved on. No drama, no shame. English became a habit, not a performance. And something unexpected happened. People started waiting for him to finish his sentences. They listened. Not because his English was perfect, but because his message was clear. He learned an important truth. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is clarity. And clarity comes from courage, repetition, and patience. Part 6. Confidence came before fluency. For a long time, he believed one thing. I'll speak when my English is good enough. But that day never came. No matter how much he studied, there was always another word he didn't know. Another mistake waiting to happen. Then he noticed something. Some people around him didn't speak perfect English either. They had accents. They made grammar mistakes. But they spoke without fear. And people listened. That's when he understood. Confidence was not the reward of fluency. It was the requirement. He stopped measuring his English by mistakes. He started measuring it by impact. Did people understand him? Did the conversation move forward? Did his words matter? If the answer was yes, then the sentence was good enough. He stood straighter when he spoke. He paused instead of rushing. He looked people in the eyes. Those small changes did more than vocabulary ever did. He learned to say, "Let me think for a second." And people waited. He learned to say, "I don't agree." And the room stayed calm. With every conversation, his fear shrank. Not because English became easy, but because he stopped treating himself like a beginner. He was no longer learning English to survive. He was using English to live, and that changed everything. Part 7. He was never perfect, just persistent. He never became perfect. His accent didn't disappear. He still searched for words sometimes. He still made small mistakes. But those things no longer defined him. What defined him was this: he showed up. Again and again. He spoke even when his sentence wasn't smooth. He asked questions even when his voice felt unsure. He shared ideas even when his grammar wasn't perfect. And over time, something changed. People stopped noticing his mistakes. They started noticing his presence. He became someone others asked for opinions, someone included in conversations, someone trusted. Not because his English was flawless, but because he was consistent. He learned that language is not a test, it's a bridge, and bridges are built one step at a time. Looking back, he realized something important. Giving up would have been easier. Staying was harder, but staying gave him a life he could recognize as his own. He didn't win by sounding like a native. He won by refusing to disappear. And maybe that's the real lesson. You don't need perfect English to move forward. You need persistence. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you see yourself in this story. Maybe English still feels heavy on your tongue. Maybe you still think twice before speaking. Maybe some days, silence feels easier. But remember this: you are not behind. You are not broken. And you are not weak. You are learning. In a language that is not your first, in a country that moves fast, in a world that rarely waits. That takes courage. You don't need perfect English to belong here. You need a voice and the patience to keep using it. Every sentence you try matters. Every mistake means you showed up. Every small effort is building something bigger than you think. So if this story spoke to you, if it made you feel a little less alone, take a moment to stay with this journey. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind you you're not the only one learning, not the only one struggling, and not the only one still trying, consider subscribing to this channel. Not because you must, but because growth is easier when you don't walk alone. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are on your English journey, don't stop speaking. You're closer than you think.